I'm Candace, and today I'm going to talk about this, the Great Hutch Project. So a lot of people have asked me about this hutch in particular, and where I got it, what I did to it, and how I turned it into what it is today. So I decided to make a video explaining how I refinished it, what products I used, and the steps I took to turn it into this beautiful piece for my craft room. So hopefully at the end of this video you'll have some insight on how to refinish a large piece of furniture like this. So I found this hutch on the Facebook Marketplace and I got it for $200. A man was getting rid of a bunch of stuff in a storage building, so this hutch just needed to go and I was in the right place at the right time. If you're looking for large pieces of furniture, it's a really good way to do it. Because you can sometimes snag up some really good deals. The craziest thing about this hutch is it was hand built by someone. There are still pencil marks on the top and the bottoms of these drawers, so you can see where they were measuring and cutting things, and it's sturdy as all get out. It is never going to fall over. This thing is amazing. So I got it for the best price in the entire world, and I'm really excited to have added it to my studio. So of course the first thing you want to do when you're refinishing something large like this is to take out the drawers and take off the doors and label everything. I wrote on the bottom of the drawers what order they went in so that I knew how to put them back. A lot of pre-assembled furniture won't have this problem, but where this was hand built, the drawers only go back in one way, so you want to make sure that you can get them back in the way that they came out and you get everything in the right spot. So the pencil marks on the bottom of the drawers actually already had them labeled, but I went ahead and went over them in Sharpie so that I wouldn't lose track of where everything was and where everything went. So that was the first step. After that, you're not going to like this, but sanding. I lightly sanded the whole thing with my palm sander. I know that most of the time when you're refinishing furniture, a lot of people don't want to do the sanding step. It's messy, it's time consuming, and it just isn't fun. There are a lot of primers and stuff out there that do adhere to slick surfaces, but if you want a finish that lasts, sanding is going to give you that finish. Even if it's just a light sanding, just go over it with a cheap palm sander. Mine was like $20 on Walmart, and it works great. I've had it for years. And it's perfect for this kind of thing. After sanding, you're going to want to clean it you've never cleaned anything before ever. It has been in storage, this one in particular, so it was a little bit on the grimy side. I cleaned everything up so that when I painted it, the paint was going to adhere really nicely. So definitely don't skip that step. It's really important, and pretty easy if you break it up into steps. I started with the bottom of this hutch. It comes into two pieces. The bottom was my choice for starting it because we have a small place and I had nowhere to really put it, so I needed to put it against the wall as I was working on it. So I started on the bottom and sanded it down, cleaned it up really good, and me and my husband brought it upstairs, and that's when I started actually doing some work to it. The next thing that I did was I primed it. My absolute favorite primer for this is called Zinsser Cover Stain, and it's really good for adhering to slick surfaces. I've actually used it on laminate furniture in the past where I haven't sanded it, and the finish did last for a long time. It did eventually start rubbing off because when you have slick surfaces that does happen, especially if you use that piece of furniture quite a bit. So you want to use a good primer in addition to sanding, no matter what that primer says on the label. Zinsser Cover Stain is my favorite because it really covers dark bases. So if I want to paint something white that was originally a dark color, it's going to block out that color really well. It's meant for covering stains, so it is going to hide anything that you don't want to see underneath your finish. I will say though, it is oil-based, so make sure that you have everything around you very well protected. I used the painting triangles to raise the hutch up off the ground so that it wouldn't touch anything, and I had some space between the floor and the hutch to paint. I also covered underneath of it with a drop cloth. I wore gloves because oil-based stuff is really, really hard to get off of your skin. Keep some mineral spirits around so you can wash off the primer on your hands whenever you're working. Make sure that you use some ventilation because it is a little bit stinky. And just all around, protect your surface and yourself and be safe. To apply the primer, I used cheap rollers and very cheap brushes because oil-based primer, like I said, doesn't come out of stuff. So I tossed them whenever I was done so that I wouldn't have to try to clean them in between all of this work. So I added 2 coats of primer and I sanded very lightly in between those coats. For this, I just used a regular sanding block because by that point I was in my craft room and I didn't want a lot of sanding dust everywhere. You don't have to do too much, just a little bit to even out your surface so that you don't get any weird lumps or stuff in your finish. So 2 coats of primer, and then I moved on to paint. There are about 1 million types of paint you can use when you're refinishing furniture. My personal favorite is I go to Lowe's and I get Valspar's Ultra. It is a wall paint, but it is extremely durable, so I've used it for several different pieces of furniture and it works really, really well without polyurethane on top of your finish. And you're able to tint it into any color that you want, and it's very cost efficient for refinishing things, especially if you are going to need about 1.5 gallons, which is what this took. When you're painting furniture, you want to make sure that the finish that you use is something that is going to be easy to clean. Flat paint is a no-go. Eggshell paint isn't great. You don't want to use anything that's flatter than, say, satin. High gloss is also a good option if that's your style, but I usually prefer satin, so that's what I went with my Ultra paint. For the paint, I used a little bit nicer brushes, but nothing too extreme. And I used a regular paint roller to get the larger sides and the insides of the cabinet. Just like the primer, I did 2 coats of paint, and this is what I ended up with. The drawers on the sides are painted to match my craft room, and for these, I just simply used Valspar paint samples. The paint samples already come in a satin finish, so you don't have to buy extra paint that you're not going to use, and you can, of course, get them tinted in whatever color that you want. They're an extremely cost-effective way to add pops of color to your pieces and give them some personality. I taped off the sides and kept everything nice and neat while I painted the drawers on the sides with just a simple foam roller. 2 coats of that, just like everything else, and they look the way they do now. The insides of the drawers are Mod Podged with wrapping paper. I found this really great wrapping paper at Hobby Lobby that matched my craft room beautifully, so I just cut out pieces of it after measuring the insides of the drawers and used Mod Podge, the matte finish, to put it on the bottoms of each drawer. To seal the drawers, I waited until the Mod Podge was dry and then put a couple of coats of Mod Podge Hard Coat on top of it. The Mod Podge Hard Coat acts exactly as it sounds, as a hard coat. Just like polyurethane or polyacrylic, only with water cleanup and a lot less mess. It does take a little bit longer to cure than one of those 2 options, but I like it for furniture, especially on the insides of things, because the odor is very, very minimal, the cleanup is easy, and it lasts a long time. After that, I measured out where I wanted to put my new hardware, drilled the holes, and put them into place. On the drawers, I added label holders so that I could put labels on each of them and keep everything nice and organized and actually know what's inside of all of these drawers. And on the doors, I just added the simple handles that match the ones on the drawers. Once I did the bottom, I brought the top upstairs and did the same thing. Painted everything after priming it, lightly sanding in between each coat, and putting everything together once it was all done. The total time of this project was actually a couple of weeks. It didn't take as long as you would think, because I was working on it a little bit every day. But it was quite an undertaking trying to get everything together and everything done. The important thing to remember when you're working on pieces like this is to kind of go at your own pace. It's going to be a little bit overwhelming when you get started, and it's going to seem like it's never going to end. But if you take your time and you just kind of work on it a little bit at a time, It's a lot easier to manage, and you're gonna feel really, really good about the progress that you've made. And that's it. That's how I refinished this giant monstrosity of a hutch and made it work for my space. I hope this video helped you out if you're getting ready to refinish a piece of furniture, especially a large one like this. I'll put a link in the description to all of the materials that I mentioned and any other things that I feel like you should have at your disposal if you want to do something like this. If you like this video, I would appreciate it if you would give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. Bye!